Good afternoon. Welcome to the continuation of the hearing in docket 2021-88E, Dominion Energy South Carolina Incorporated's 2021 avoided cost proceeding. Let's take a roll call of commissioners. Present in the hearing room, we have Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Williams, Commissioner Powers, and Commissioner Belser. And present virtually, or appearing virtually, we have Commissioner Urban and Commissioner Caston. Attorneys, for the record, I do like to get the attorneys that are present today on the record. I think it helps the court reporter list who is present. So who's here with us today from Dominion Energy, South Carolina?
Good morning, Vice Chair Belzer. I'm Chad Burgess, and with me is Matthew Gisson-Danner, Mitchell Willoughby, and Tracy Green, and collectively we represent the company.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Johnson Development Associates.
Good afternoon. This is Court Walsh representing Johnson Development. Along with me, my colleague and partner, Weston Adams, may join later, but for right now, it's me.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Belzer. Roger Hall on behalf of the department. Also with me is Connor Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Carolina Clean Energy Business Association.
Good afternoon, Richard Witt for Carolina's Clean Energy Business Association.
And John Burns also for Carolina's Clean Energy Business Association.
Thank you,
Mr. Witt.
Thank you, Mr. Witt and Mr. Burns. Pine Gate Renewables.
Richard Witt.
And good afternoon. This is Bland Holman, also for Pine Gate Renewables.
Thank you, Mr. Witt and Mr. Holman. South Carolina Coastal Conservation League and Southern Alliance for Clean Energy.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Belzer. This is Emma Clancy appearing on behalf of CCL and SACE.
Thank you, Ms. Clancy. And Office of Regulatory Staff.
Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair. This is Chris Huber here for ORS, and I am joined by Alex Knowles.
Thank you, Mr. Huber. Are there any preliminary matters which we need to take up before we begin closing statements? Hearing none, I'm going to use the same order which was used back in the IRP docket. We'll hear from the interveners, ORS, and Dominion. So we will start with Johnson Development Associates.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Again, Court Walsh on behalf of Johnson Development. I really appreciate the Commission's time in this matter, and we don't have any closing statement at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs.
Yes, thank you. Again, my name is Roger Hall. I'm the Deputy Consumer Advocate with the Department of Consumer Affairs. The department's statutory mandate is to advocate for consumers in commission matters that may impact rates. While we have not submitted testimony in this matter, we have thoroughly reviewed the filings with the consumer interest in mind. In this case, making sure the avoided cost is not above the actual cost, such that residential customers would overpay. With the avoided cost hearings still being relatively new, and this being the department's first time participating in them, we are also glad to be able to address potential procedural issues related to the filings. Shortly after we moved to intervene, we filed a motion for the Commission to review the sufficiency of Dominion's application. The motion was granted, and Dominion was ordered to file a more thorough application by June 7th. Without the Commission's order granting our motion, the parties in this docket would have been at an even greater disadvantage in preparing their cases, as Dominion was not scheduled to file its direct testimony until June 29th. As the department has noted in this and other dockets, we continue to believe that the Commission should require complete substantive applications in each case. We also believe companies should submit direct testimony and supporting documentation simultaneously with their applications in order to improve efficiency and create more thorough, informed hearings and final orders. Particularly in a complex case like this, where a third-party consultant is retained by the Commission, additional time is invaluable, not only to interveners, but also to the Commission. Therefore, we believe the commission should clearly identify in its order those items that must be submitted in the next avoided cost hearing 2 years from now. While the department had concerns with Dominion's initial filing, and also not ignoring the fact that Dominion filed a second amended application on June 25th, we did find they were reasonably transparent in their subsequent testimony and discovery responses. The department hired a consultant to help us review the issues and pleadings from all parties and prepare discovery. Our consultant was satisfied with the assumptions and data provided by Dominion. After our review, we found Dominion's proposals were overall reasonable, and therefore we decided not to file testimony. We do have concerns with some aspects of the proposals of other interveners and LEI. We attempted to address those issues through cross-examination, and we plan to address them further in a proposed order or brief. We really do appreciate the Commission's attention and commitment to understanding the complex issues that were involved in this case. We understand the difficult task you all face in balancing the various interests. We ask that you remember one important thing when you're making your decision. While renewable energy providers are making their cases for higher compensation, it is the consumers that will ultimately pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Carolina Clean Energy Business Association.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Members of the commission, this is John Burns for Carolina's Clean Energy Business Association. It's been a long proceeding, and we appreciate your patience and diligence throughout the process. I also want to thank my local counsel, Richard Witt, for his assistance and guidance in representing members of CCBA before you. You've heard much technical testimony regarding 3 issues concerning Dominion's avoided cost application. First, Dominion proposed avoided energy and capacity rates. Second, its purchase agreement and commitment form terms and conditions. And third, its overall methodology, including the proposed variable integration charge, or VIC. We'll be submitting a proposed order that addresses each of these issues in turn, but today I'd like to focus on the latter 2, the terms and conditions of the forms proposed by Dominion, and of course, the VIC. Act 62, Section 58-41-20B states that in implementing the statute's PURPA provisions, the Commission, quote, shall treat small power producers on a fair and equal footing with utility-owned resources by ensuring that rates, terms, and conditions and methodologies approved by the Commission meet certain standards. That word ensuring is critically important because it means that this Commission has an active role to play. There is no rubber stamp involved in Act 62. On the issues of the forms proposed by Dominion, I will not rehash the evidence and arguments that you've already heard, but I urge you to do this. Consider carefully the perspective and testimony of the only small power producer developer you have heard from over the last few months, CCBA's witness, Stephen Levitas. When considering the need for changes to documents that were previously approved in 2019, consider whether or not the utility has shown a need for those changes, which is tied specifically to the reduction of risk to South Carolina's ratepayers and consumers. Act 62 requires you to find a balance. You might have heard throughout this proceeding from some witnesses that what CCBA wants is a guarantee of profitability for its members. And of course, that is not the standard you apply. However, when the restrictions and hoops imposed by the utility are too great or too complicated, potential QF developers simply won't try to participate, and the advantage to ratepayers of having clean and renewable energy will be lost. We'll address the details of the various forms and PPAs in our proposed order, but please keep the Commission's responsibility to ensure fairness and equal footing in mind. It is, of course, critical to understand that the statute requires the terms and conditions to be commercially reasonable, which, as you heard from LEI, involves considerations of fair industry practice. Changes made that make transactions more expensive and cumbersome for no discernible reason other than corporate practice do not meet that standard. Turning to the VIC, Section 584120B again requires the Commission treat small power producers on a fair and equal footing. Subsection 3 specifies that this requires that a utility's avoided cost methodology fairly account for costs avoided or incurred by the utility, including ancillary services provided by or consumed by small power producers. And the General Assembly then went further than that on integration costs in particular, and directed this Commission to consider whether PPAs should prohibit reducing the price paid to QFs based on costs incurred by the utility, quote, to respond to the intermittent nature of QF production. And that's in Section 3B. Witness Burgess demonstrated that the VIC based on the Guidehouse study overstates Dominion's costs integrating solar QFs, and he proposed specific ways of correcting that study and the VIC. This commission has a tough decision to make when it comes to updating the VIC, and I believe all of the parties to this proceeding support an independent study being done. That should go a long way towards making future avoided cost proceedings less complicated and contentious than this one on the issue of integration charges. But it is also important that you establish, as required by the statute, a fixed VIC in the meantime. 3 separate attempts have been made in this proceeding to define what that VIC should be. Then another study, provided by LEI, compared and contrasted the results of those attempts. You heard from Guidehouse through Mr. David, you heard from the ORS through Mr. Ori, and you heard from CCBA's witness, Mr. Burgess. Guidehouse purports to establish a VIC by modeling the operating reserves that it claims Dominion needs to accommodate increasing solar energy on its system. But the one thing that Mr. Ori, Mr. Burgess, and LEI all agree upon is that the Guidehouse study did not fully justify the level of reserves it modeled for accommodating solar. The Guidehouse study simply has not been shown to be a proper basis for imposing a VIC that does little to protect ratepayers, but kills QF development that could reduce ratepayer risk from gas and coal price spikes like the ones we're experiencing today. What we do know about the Guidehouse study is that even Dominion hasn't decided whether to approve it, but their system operator had not reviewed it, and in fact has operated the Dominion system reliably in a way that has onboarded over 900 megawatts of solar. In fact, Mr. Burgess analyzed the historical operating reserves carried by DESC prior to any solar being added to its system, and that analysis suggested that DESC hasn't actually increased the operating reserves it carries as new solar has come online at all. The reserves they have set aside have never been exceeded. That is evidence that Dominion's integration costs have been, in reality, zero. In fact, Dominion has failed to show any actual integration costs to date. But Mr. Burgess didn't stop there. And contrary to the impression left by some of Dominion's witnesses, Mr. Burgess is not taking an inflexible position and insisting upon a zero VIC. On the contrary, he, and he alone, did what witness Ori and witness Golding did not do. He did a deep analytical dive into the Guidehouse study and identified problems that needed to be corrected to bring that study closer to reality. He tackled issues like hourly weighting and how integration costs are spread across the various tranches of solar. It's important to note here that Mr. Burgess worked within the models used by Guidehouse, to the extent Dominion and Guidehouse disclosed them. Mr. Burgess analyzed the materials presented by Dominion and Guidehouse, worked his way through the modeling, and made all of that analysis available to this commission and the other parties in this proceeding. And what was the result? Well, when you make the corrections to the Guidehouse study, which Mr. Burgess has transparently and fully justified, you get a moderately lower VIC, somewhere between 28 cents per megawatt hour and 73 cents per megawatt hour, instead of the $1.80 per megawatt hour calculated for Tranche 1 by DESC. Now, although this change would only have a de minimis impact on customers, about 6 cents a month, it has a significant impact on QFs in terms of the risk they undertake to provide clean and renewable energy to South Carolinians. And again, your job under Act 62 in part is to balance the impacts of your decisions on customers, on the public interest, and on QFs. And also to make that decision in the context of this state's clearly stated policy to promote renewable energy. You heard yesterday from LEI, which told you in its own report that it did not consider the calculation of the VIC to be within its mandate. You heard Mr. Goulding, on behalf of LEI, say that what Mr. Burgess was doing was pulling threads out of the quilt on the VIC. And if you do that, the whole thing falls apart. With respect to Mr. Goulding, that analogy is wrong. Mr. Burgess is not pulling threads. Mr. Burgess got under the hood and got his hands dirty, understanding a complex machine. He knows how these engines work. He knows how they are supposed to run, how they're supposed to sound, and he's turning a bolt here, cleaning a filter there, and in short, tuning it up. When he's done, it doesn't fall apart. It works better. At the end of the day, we know an additional independent study needs to be conducted, and we know that there are problems with the Guidehouse study. And we know that witness Burgess is the only person to appear before you that actually rolled his sleeves up, lifted the hood, dug into the data, and provided this commission with an alternative VIC calculation that is supported by the evidence on the record in the proceeding. Whatever that final figure is, CCBA urges you to reject the excessively high charges proposed by Dominion and Guidehouse, and keep in mind the balance of interests at stake in this proceeding. I appreciate your patience and your engagement in this proceeding, and I thank you for this opportunity to speak with you one last time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Pine Gate Renewables.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair and members of the commission. Thank you for your attention to this proceeding, which is vital for both existing and future small power producers in South Carolina. You heard evidence and testimony on three major issues in the case: the avoided energy and capacity rates first, second, the PPA and commitment forms, terms and conditions, and third, Dominion's variable integration charge. Now, regarding that first issue, avoided capacity and energy rates, Pine Gate agrees with the recommendations of witness Cersei, many of which were joined by LEI. Suggested changes will result in more accurate rates that are paid to QFs, and that is essential to fulfill the purpose of PURPA and to reduce risk on ratepayers. On the second issue, proposed terms and conditions for PPAs and notice of commitment forms, we support the position of the Carolina Clean Business Association as joined largely by LEI. Dominion has not justified most of its proposed changes, and they will add costs and burdens to QFs for no good reason. Finally, as regards to the VIC, we believe the evidence has shown that Dominion's proposal should not be accepted, and if accepted, would continue to inhibit small power producer development in South Carolina, contrary to Act 62. Now, as you know, Act 62 requires that the Commission treat small power producers on a fair and equal footing regarding ancillary services and integration costs. That is very specific language in Act 62. The General Assembly did not enact that for no reason, and we would commend those standards to you and submit that they govern this proceeding. Unfortunately, the VIC, based on the flawed and opaque Guidehouse study, does not meet the standards of the statute, and they could continue the trend of no QF development in Dominion territory. ORS and LEI both agree that the Guidehouse study did not fully justify the proposed VIC. We therefore support the corrections presented by witness Ed Burgess based on his extensive analysis, which was far more extensive and involved than that conducted by ORS or LEI. We look forward to submitting details in our proposed order. We thank the Commission for its attention to this matter, and I thank you for the opportunity to appear.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. If we could pause just a second, we got something beeping here in the hearing room. I'm trying to figure out what it is. Okay. There it goes. Okay, I think we've got that. I think it stopped. Thank you. South Carolina Coastal Conservation League and Southern Alliance for Clean Energy.
Thank you. Once again, this is Emma Clancy appearing on behalf of SACE and CCL. Thank you, Vice Chair Belzer and members of the Commission for the opportunity to provide this closing statement. Despite the many technical issues raised in this avoided costs proceeding, the objective is simple: to ensure the accuracy and transparency of Dominion's avoided costs rates, as required by the Energy Freedom Act. Even after extensive testimony and 2 in-depth hearings, Dominion has failed to demonstrate that its avoided cost proposal meets these standards. To start, the company's proposed rates, both avoided energy and capacity, do not accurately reflect its avoided costs. To develop its avoided energy rates, the company used an unreasonable natural gas price forecast, one the Commission has previously rejected, that resulted in unreasonably low avoided energy rates. Further, with respect to the 11 pricing periods in Dominion's non-solar standard offer tariff, Dominion witnesses have still offered no explanation for how exactly they developed those proposed periods, and have failed to show why Mr. Searcy's proposed methodology would not improve their accuracy. For avoided capacity, the company unreasonably limits all capacity contribution to the winter, despite having a clear summer capacity need and an impending coal retirement that will cause both winter and summer capacity to fall below their respective reserve margins. In so doing, the company makes the same arguments that the Commission rejected in the last avoided cost proceeding. In addition, Dominion used unreasonably low capital cost assumptions, choosing to rely on recent vendor pricing that has also been previously rejected by this Commission in the IRP proceeding. The company also opposes using a performance adjustment factor, even though such a measure has been previously approved by this Commission and would put small power producers on equal footing with the resources Dominion owns, ensuring non-discriminatory treatment for all qualifying facilities, not just solar. Witness Searcy's testimony identified these real, concrete shortcomings in Dominion's proposal and did not make complaints, as Dominion witnesses have repeatedly asserted. Interveners' role is to review Dominion's avoided cost proposal to ensure that Dominion, a regulated utility, is doing its job correctly and in the best interest of ratepayers. Mr. Goulding, an independent consultant, also performs this role and reached many of the same conclusions as Mr. Searcy, agreeing with him on the performance adjustment factor, capital cost assumptions, and technology neutral rates. Though LEI accepted Dominion's gas price outlook as defensible, it chose to employ Mr. Searcy's recommended approach in its own modeling. Like interveners, LEI also found that Dominion's application left many basic assumptions out of its initial and revised applications and direct testimony, including the company's natural gas assumptions. Even with the company's discovery responses, its underlying assumptions, data, and results, such as load data in summer months, the methodology supporting its pricing periods, and the calculations used to derive the ELCC, remain unclear or missing. Dominion's failure to meet the transparency requirements of Act 62 undermines the whole purpose of this proceeding, which is to allow a thorough review of the utility's avoided cost proposal. To conclude, the Energy Freedom Act requires that Dominion's rates and filings be accurate, fair, and transparent. Without these assurances, the Commission cannot have confidence that small power producers are receiving fair compensation and being given a fair chance to compete to the benefit of all ratepayers. For these reasons, we respectfully request that the Commission adopt SACE and CCL's recommendations to improve the accuracy of Dominion's avoided cost rates, ensure the fair treatment of qualifying facilities, and require greater transparency from Dominion in future avoided cost filings. Thank you for your attention in this proceeding and for the opportunity to present our case.
Thank you, Ms. Clancy. Office of Regulatory Staff.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, members of the Commission. ORS conducted a review of Dominion Energy's South Carolina's filings and proposals in this proceeding consistent with the agency's statutory mission to represent the public interest. Because avoided energy and capacity costs paid by Dominion to qualified facilities ultimately are paid by all customers under Dominion's fuel adjustment clauses, it is important that the methodologies employed by the company and the resulting avoided energy and capacity rates accurately account for costs avoided or incurred by the company in accordance with Act 62. Further, Act 62 requires that decisions in these proceedings shall be just and reasonable to the ratepayers of the electrical utility in the public interest, consistent with PURPA and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission's implementing regulations and orders, and non-discriminatory to small power producers, and shall strive to reduce the risk placed on the using and consuming public. As a result of its review, ORS made recommendations in its testimony regarding the VIC and the avoided energy and capacity rates proposed by Dominion, including the following. First, that the VIC be left unchanged and remain subject to true-up in accordance with the Commission's order and the company's prior avoided cost proceeding. Second, that the Commission approve the company's proposed avoided energy costs for the rates for PR1 solar, standard offer solar, and standard offer non-solar. Third, that the Commission adopt ORS's recommended PR1 time of use energy credits for non-solar generators that better reflect the variation in the company's marginal energy costs, and that the Commission adopt ORS's recommended avoided capacity rates, which correct the generation capacity change to 66 megawatts and correct the differential revenue requirement referenced here to 2022 instead of 2020. Dominion, in its survey testimony, indicated it was willing to accept ORS's recommendation regarding the VIC and does not oppose the modification ORS witness Brian Horry proposes to one of the time of use periods for non-solar generators on the PR1 rate. Dominion accepted ORS's recommended change to the differential revenue requirement reference here and filed updated tariffs reflecting this change. London Economics, in its report, also agrees with several of ORS's recommendations. In conclusion, ORS appreciates the work of the Commission and staff in conducting this hearing. If the recommendations in the London Economics report were to be accepted, ORS does not consider them to be binding for purposes of future proceedings, and ORS may take positions different from those recommendations in future proceedings. As I stated at the outset of this week's hearing, while ORS stands behind the recommendations presented in its testimony and does not agree with everything in the London Economics report, ORS is willing to accept the report as a compromise of the issues in this proceeding. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair and members of the Commission. That concludes my closing.
Thank you, Mr. Huber. Dominion Energy.
Chad Burgess on behalf of Dominion Energy, South Carolina. Thank you, Vice Chair Belzer and members of the Commission. The company appreciated the opportunity to provide you with data-driven testimony based upon what it experiences on a day-to-day basis. And in this proceeding, you heard from 12 witnesses as well as London Economics on topics ranging from the proper avoided cost methodology to the cost to integrate variable generation to DESC's form contracts. And the Commission's consideration of this testimony must account for the docket's primary objective, ensuring compliance with PURPA. And to be clear, the avoided cost rate methodology set by you in this proceeding must ensure that purchases made by Dominion Energy under PURPA are at or below its system avoided cost. Now, at times, the discussion sounded like adding QF solar under PURPA was the only way for South Carolina to add renewable energy to the company's electric system, but it's not. There are other ways to ensure that solar, along with other forms of renewable energy, can be added to the company's system. For example, renewable energy could be added to the company's system through a competitive procurement program to meet a megawatt need identified in the company's IRP. In fact, London Economics testified on this option and made clear that although outside the scope of this proceeding, such a program could provide benefits to the Dominion Energy system if structured properly. And you also heard SECEBA witness Levitas state that SECEBA is a big fan of competitive procurement. But this docket is not about how to add solar to the company's system. This docket is about the company's compliance with provisions of Act 62 in purpose. Both the avoided cost methodology and form documents presented in this proceeding must be evaluated against the 5 statutory factors set out in Act 62, which includes compliance with PURPA. And at the end of the day, this means that you must ensure that the company's customers do not pay excessive avoided cost, which London Economics told you should be a key objective in this docket. And I don't want this fact to get lost, but ensuring that the company's customers are protected was a key driver in Dominion Energy's filings in this docket. As for testimony, company witness Cassis testified that the amount of solar generation on the company's system is around 1,000 megawatts. This total can represent about 30 to 40% of the company's total generation to meet load on any given hour of any day. This level of solar penetration is significant, not only when compared against other electric service territories in our state, but also when compared against other electric service territories throughout the Southeast. And for the purposes of this proceeding, this amount is incredibly important because it directly impacts the calculation of avoided cost. And with each additional unit added to the company's system, the cost avoided by that purchase go down. This is an elementary principle of economics. You also heard from company witness David, who told you that the company has no incentive to depress the amounts paid to QS. And that's because no matter what values are approved in this docket, by law, the company recovers these amounts from its customers. That's who ultimately shoulders the burden of paying these amounts, customers. And as you heard from company witness Neely, the company's only motivation in presenting avoided cost rates was to fulfill Act 62's mandate that the amount paid to QFs fully and accurately reflect Dominion Energy's avoided cost. Additionally, as clearly demonstrated by company witness Hanslick and quantified by Guidehouse through their comprehensive study, there are also costs to integrate variable QF solar generation into the DESC system. In fact, you heard witness Hanslick tell you that the company had to physically construct a facility so that a person could manage the vast amounts of solar on the company's system. And he also described how he and his team must react to the ever-changing output of these facilities in real time. These are real costs and challenges, and DESC is the only party in this docket who quantified these costs. According to Guidehouse, who is a leading national expert, these costs are $1.80 per megawatt per hour today and increase to almost $5 a megawatt hour as more solar is added to the system. These integration costs, which are ultimately costs to DESC's customers, will only go up as more solar is added under PURPA, while avoided costs for the same resource with the same profile will only go down. ORS witness Horty provided corroborating testimony citing his extensive work in California and Hawaii. His experience in those states is consistent with the company's experience. That is, increasing amounts of solar generation can require additional ramping capability and reserves to meet the intermittent nature of solar generation. Also, witness Horry did not refute the values established by Guidehouse for the VIC, but he offered a compromise, an interim value of 96 cents subject to true up. Now, we know from operating experience that value is too low. In fact, London Economics acknowledged on cross-examination that the company can expect to have higher integration costs than other larger systems with similar amounts of solar simply because of the amount of solar generation on the DESC system. To the extent, however, that another study will help establish an accurate, permanent VIC, the company is willing to accept this value on an interim basis subject to true-up. Additionally, DESC reviewed its standard offer, form PPA, and notice of commitment to sell form and proposed a limited number of changes. These changes are customer-focused, reflect recent FERC guidance, and the simple reality that these QF projects are becoming more complex and more costly. As company witness Folsom testified, the cost to develop these projects can approach $100 million. So yes, we believe asking commercial developers to carry $2 million in insurance on a $100 million electric generating facility that customers depend upon for power is reasonable. In fact, London Economics not only supported the company's proposal to increase insurance amounts in the form PPA, but it also agreed with the company's proposed form of surety bond. These measures are designed to protect its customers, as were the changes to the NOC form, which incorporate the FERC's recent guidance on these issues. However, the solar developers advocate binding the utility under the NOC form without any real commitment from the developer, and then using that NOC form to obtain financing for their project. But that's not how the law works. And the testimony submitted by London Economics and the company reflect that a developer must evidence a substantial commitment in order to establish their commitment to sell under the NOC form. Now, turning to transparency, you've heard the solar developers and their colleagues at CCL and SACE claim over and over again that the company has not been transparent. This is nothing more than a red herring that is designed to draw your attention from the issues I just discussed. And I want you to understand what's happening here that gives rise to that argument. You heard witness Searcy testify. He couldn't remember when he was hired by CCL and SACE, but he thought it was in June or July. And you heard Seceiva witness Burgess testify that his agreement to work on this matter wasn't finalized until July 1. Their testimony was originally due on July 13th. It's obvious that CCL, SACE, and Seceiva were way behind in their preparations for this docket right out of the gate. And I would submit to you that the argument that the company has been anything less than transparent is clearly designed to draw your attention away from this fact. What's great, though, is that you heard from witness Searcy say that he received everything the DESC provided to ORS and the other parties of record, and that the company responded to every discovery demand of CCL and SACE. And here's what's interesting. The witnesses from CCL, SACE, and Seceiva say they couldn't review and verify the company's information. That's what they said. Yet they conducted enough of a review to present you with plenty of recommendations in their mind, improving DESC's avoided cost calculations. And all of their recommendations are designed to increase cost to customers, which directly benefits the solar developers. But don't you find it strange that they were all given the information they needed, but they never performed any calculations regarding the matters for this commission for decision? You heard Whitney Searcy admit that he didn't perform certain calculations. And it wasn't because he didn't have the information. He just didn't do it. And the same is true for Seceiva witness Burgess regarding the VIC study. He didn't do it. But you can't ignore the fact that ORS witness Horry and the commission's expert London Economics could and did perform the calculations. So here's where you are, commissioners. London Economics described DESC as highly responsive, and Mr. Horry did not mince words when he told you that DESC's filing was reasonably transparent so that he could review and verify the company's avoided cost calculations. Witness Searcy, however, is at the complete opposite end of the spectrum. And I would submit to you that when multiple people have the same exact information and two witnesses perform the calculations and the others do not, you can only reach one result. The filing is transparent under Act 62. In closing, Act 62 represents the General Assembly's clear concern for customers because it's mandated that your decision in this docket be 1, just and reasonable to ratepayers, 2, in the public interest, 3, consistent with PURPA and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission's implementing regulations and orders, and 4, strives to reduce the risk placed on the using and consuming public. 3 of these 4 factors expressly contemplate the interest of DESC's customers, and the 4th expressly mentions PURPA, which incorporates customer protections such as limiting the must-purchase obligation to a price at or below a utility's avoided cost. So what does all this mean for you as a commission? Because whatever decision you make in this docket, it will impact customers. Because just like the Department of Consumer Affairs just informed you, it's the customer who pays the avoided cost. The only question is, how much is the customer going to pay? And oh, by the way, they're not going to pay one time. They're going to end up paying for a decade, which is the term of a PPA. You've been presented with a range of options from which to choose. That is a choice between DESC's proposal, which provides an accurate avoided cost methodology to calculate the avoided cost and the verifiable integration cost in accordance with PURPA and Act 62 that protects the customer's interest, or on the other hand, approving the intervener's proposal to inflate avoided cost rates paid to QS to the benefit of project developers and to the detriment of DESC's customers. Those are the boundaries. DESC is at the customer end of the spectrum. It provides an avoided cost methodology and a VET calculation that would impose the least cost on its customers. And don't ignore that London Economics described DESC's avoided cost calculations as within the range of reasonableness. One step removed from DESC on this end of the spectrum is ORS. Choosing options at this end of the spectrum emphasize accurate avoided cost rates and customer protection measures that will ultimately result in less costs being imposed on customers. And alternatively, you have the option at the other end of the spectrum that would provide a higher rate of return to project developers by imposing more cost on DESC's customers. At the far end of the spectrum is SECEVA's proposal, which is the most favorable proposal to the solar community. London Economics' proposal is one step removed, but still would result in higher costs imposed on the company's customers than those recommendations provided by ORS and the company. Therefore, the commission's choice is clear, and it comes down to determining what level of cost should be borne by DESC's customers. And with that, the company respectfully requests that the commission approve the company's avoided cost methodology and form documents in this document. Thank you, Vice Chair Belzer.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Thank you, parties, for your presentations and your professionalism during this proceeding. I know that it's been long. We had a number of days in August and having a break, and a little over 2 days here. We appreciate all the work that the parties have put into this, and we appreciate the manner in which y'all have conducted yourselves. I'm always very proud of the bar that practices here before the commission, because y'all do such a good job. We do need to get a date for proposed orders in this case. We are under some deadlines here. I understand that the court reporter needs 2 weeks or 10 business days for regular delivery of the transcript. So that will be somewhere around October 11th or 12th. The transcript for the hearing dates in August have already been completed and provided to anyone requesting a copy of that transcript. Therefore, we are looking for proposed orders to be due by 12 noon on Wednesday, November 3rd. And would request anyone wishing to provide a proposed order to do so by 12 noon on Wednesday, November 3rd. If there's nothing further to come before the commission in this proceeding, we will adjourn this proceeding.
Excuse me, Vice.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, Vice.
Mr. Hall.
Sorry, Vice Chair Belzer. Yes, Roger Hall, Department. I would ask permission to submit, if the department could submit a brief in lieu of a proposed order.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
That will be fine. Okay, if nothing else to come before the commission, we will adjourn this meeting, and you will be notified of our decision as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.